Howdy, howdy, y'all. Welcome back to Some Antics. Today I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by the one and only Kilian Valkhof. Kilian, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited to have you on. I was first made aware of you from Stephanie Eccles' stream. You were on her stream at one point. And since then, we've been chatting in Alex Trost's Discord server. I'll put a link to that in the chat. But yeah, I'm super excited to have you on. For folks who don't know who you are, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Kilian. I'm a web developer from the Netherlands. I've been doing this for a very, very long time. But in the last few years, I've made the switch from developing websites to basically full-time developing tools for people that build websites.
That's awesome. And I can see even in your bio, you've got quite a few tools that you can that you've built.
Yeah.
Like you've got this like fix alley one. Do you say ally? I say alley. Um,
Um, I I I am Dutch, so
hmm,
there's very few places where I have to speak the word ally or ally
hmm.
aloud. Because usually we default to the Dutch version, which is toegankelijkheid.
I'm gonna
Repeat
have to
after me.
capture that one later. You're gonna have to just send me in the chat how to spell that because I have to caption that one later. And I'm not gonna do the bog standard in brackets speak Dutch. I'm
I've just sent it.
there we go.
But it's yeah, it's like that's the common term in the Netherlands that we all just use for accessibility work.
Okay.
So I really only know it as the thing you type to prevent yourself from typing a 13-letter word.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, awesome. Yeah, so you've built a ton of cool tools, like for instance, Fix Alley, which is a browser extension to
Yeah, that's right.
retroactively fix issues on different websites, which is super cool stuff. But what we're here today to talk about is Polypane, which is it seems like easily the like most intense thing you've built in terms of
Absolutely.
dev tooling.
Yeah.
Uh, Let me put a link to that in the chat. And um, I yeah. What is Polypane first of all?
Yeah. So Polypane is a browser, except it's not a browser that you would use to, visit Facebook or use Twitter with, but it's a browser that you use for creating websites. So it started out as like literally three sizes of the same website side by side, like just in iframes when I first started prototyping it, because I got sick of having to resize my browser all the time.
Okay.
And I figured, there has to be a better way. So I created a small prototype and started using that instead. And I liked it, but I didn't really think much of it. Like it was just a small tool that I built for myself. Except, and at that point, I was running a web agency. So I was very strict with keeping hours as well. And what I noticed was that the same type of websites were now taking 60% less time using this, hack together prototype that I built.
Okay.
So that was pretty big, and that made me think, there's something here. I enjoy it more, and I'm much faster. What else can we add? And from there on, I've just been adding basically every feature that I want as a web developer. Uh, has been added to Polypane or will be added to Polypane in the next couple of years, because I have about 5 years worth of features still left for me to add to this browser.
That
So
is that is intense. That's quite the backlog you've got there, Killian.
yeah.
All right. Yeah, so I put the link to this in the chat. I've not actually had a whole lot of opportunity to play around with Polypane, which is why I brought Killian on. But I have seen a couple of other streamers, Stephanie Eccles and Alex Trost, on the on their various streams. Sorry, I need to. There's been a whole lot of stuff with bots going on, and I need to fix a thing. Um,
Sure.
so there we go. All right. Yeah. So I've noticed a couple of streamers that we're friends with have been showing off this tool. It seems super awesome. Haven't had the chance to really play around with it. And so let's go ahead and dive into that. I've
Yeah,
got it
sure.
pulled up, and the first thing I notice is I see what appears to be the same site 3 times.
That's right. Because it literally is the same site that you just happen to see in 3 different sizes. So the illusion that I'm creating here, because like when you get down to it, this is the site shown 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
But what Polypane adds is that any interaction you have in one of these sizes, which I call panes, so I'll just call them panes from now on,
Okay.
because, Polypane. So anything you do in any of the panes, whether it be scrolling or clicking or hovering or typing, it happens in all of the panes at the same time. So it's really like you're interacting and you're using a website that just happens to be shown at multiple sizes, which is essentially what you want as you're developing this, because you're not developing a static website that's just this
Mm-hmm.
wide. You're developing a website for a whole range of devices.
Absolutely. And I think it's when you don't have these views like this, it's so easy to let one view go by the wayside, right? It feels like one of those like memes where it's a triangle, like you've got 3 options and it's like pick two, right? Like you remember to do mobile and desktop sizes, but you forget tablet, or maybe you've got
Yeah,
something that works for tablet and laptop, but doesn't work well for mobile.
it's
Yeah.
it's very often like the tablety sizes that get overlooked,
Mm,
which is a huge shame, because while we as developers like to have our browser screen nice and uh,
mm-hmm.
full size, full screen, a ton of your actual users don't have their browser full screen, and also they don't have 4K HD
Mm-hmm.
27, 32-inch monitors. So
Absolutely.
they're on like a 12-inch Chromebook with the browser at half size, which is essentially the width of a tablet. So it's one of those
Mhm.
things where the way we work doesn't help with, or doesn't match with, the way people actually use your website.
Absolutely. Yeah, okay, so I figured, because it's kind of the most evident feature of Polypane, I figured maybe we could spend some time just playing around with adding panes and doing different things with them.
Yeah.
Um, yes, I see you've answered a question from Travis in the chat on whether this is built on Chromium, which is a great call out, right? Because this means that you aren't necessarily validating how things behave in like Safari, for instance, right? Like
That's
it's
right. Yeah.
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 Or
So
yeah.
Polypane runs on Chromium. Right now it's Chromium 91. I try
Okay.
to stick very close to the current version of Chromium, so that you can always use uh, like the new stuff. It does mean that there is no WebKit or Safari renderer, and there's also no Gecko renderer.
Mhm.
I would love to add that, but neither of them have an embeddable cross-platform uh, rendering engine. So Safari specifically only works on Mac,
Mhm.
uh, and Firefox has a thing called Gecko View, but it only works on Android, and they haven't shown any interest in porting it over to other platforms. So it's something I would love to do, but yeah, definitely. Using Polypane does not mean you don't have to do cross-browser testing. What it does mean is that, instead of doing cross-size, cross-browser testing, you can do all your sizes in Polypane and then do spot checks for things like the general layout and the JavaScript rendering or the JavaScript engine in Safari in Firefox.
Gotcha.
Because that's where things break.
Mm-hmm. Looks like Travis is asking whether you can use Chrome extensions with Polypane.
Yeah, so if you right click the DevTools icon, which is the little code one in the header.
In the header. Oh, code one. Still getting used to all these icons. So it's that. Oh, yeah, that would make
Yeah.
sense. Yes, okay, got it. Oh, look at that. Yeah, I've got a full.
Then click Manage Extensions.
Ooh, okay. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's
Yeah,
good.
so Polypane supports a whole bunch of DevTools extensions. So you can add the React Developer tools or the Angular DevTools or the Svelte DevTools, and we have a whole bunch of them like built in. Like you can type Vue and it will suggest the Vue DevTools for you, for example.
Okay. Oh, look
you
at that.
can also add your own. Not all of them will work because some of them use APIs that don't match well with what Polypane does, and that's the same for like regular browser extensions. So regular browser extensions like my fixed contrast extension, for example, they expect there to be this Chromium address bar and always a single tab that's focused, and they can inject stuff into a single tab. But Polypane doesn't have that. Doesn't have those APIs.
Gotcha.
So maybe it's something I'll add in the future, but for now, you can definitely use developer extensions, so DevTools extensions, for your React, for your Vue, for your Svelte, whatever you happen to use.
I also just love that inadvertently we've like opened up the standard Chrome inspector, so I could dive in and do pretty much all the same things that you would do in Chrome proper to debug, which unlocks a whole lot. I'm sure there's we got our styles inspector down here as well, so you could play around with stuff, which is very fun. I am noticing that it only seems to be impacting the far left pane. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. So you immediately went for the DevTools, the Chromium DevTools, and DevTools, as Chromium has built them, always map to a single what they call web contents.
Okay.
So a single instance of a web page.
Interesting.
I've built my own DevTools, which you can find in the Elements tab, which is slightly under your cursor.
Elements.
So two tabs to the left.
Oh, I see. Okay, over here. Yes. Oh, look at that.
And if you select anything here or add anything here, so if you, for example, hover over your name in any of the panes, so it says, hey, Ben, let's run Polypane in 3 minutes. You can either right click and select not inspect elements in DevTools, but inspect elements.
Okay.
Or what you can do is press Alt as you do that.
Alt or Option in my case, because I'm on a Mac.
Option.
Okay.
Yeah, Alt or Option. It immediately focuses whatever element is under your cursor. So you can get quick access to a whole bunch of info.
Very cool.
And then if you click it, it opens it in the Elements panel. So if you do that now, for example.
Nice. Okay.
Then you can see that we have the button here and selected. We can see the box model. At the bottom, we can see the styling, the computed styles, and any of the attributes that are set, and some accessibility info.
Yeah.
And anything you edit here is edited in all panes at the same time.
That's awesome.
So what we could do, for example, is in the middle where it says button, it says SVG and text node under it. And if we click on text node.
Yes, where's the looking for text node?
Right, so below the tree, you
there we go. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Oh. Okay.
And anything you type here now will be typed in all panes at the same time. So this is a really convenient way to check that, if you're, for example, sitting with a client and they're like, can we try some other text, or
Mm-hmm.
how does this sentence look? You can just pop it open here, type in the sentence that they want, and then immediately see at all sizes how that text looks like. Does it break
Mm-hmm.
across lines weirdly? Do we need to tweak a little bit?
Yeah.
Does
I
everything fit or not?
I can think of this as being really strong for there was a tweet from Kitty Gerardel recently. I'm gonna open this up in uh Chrome. Um but it was let's see. But it was the Twitter interface. How in
Oh, yeah.
German, because like German words for all these things are just absolutely like far too long. I guess it's not even in German. Yeah, no, it was just yeah,
Zoomed in. Yeah,
yeah,
it was zoomed in a lot.
yes.
So
If yeah, oh god, Killing.
I actually do have another feature for that. We're going through it a bit haphazardly, but that's fine. If you go back to Polypane
Yep.
and then open the debug tools for any of the panels.
Okay, so the debug tools are okay. The little pencil and ruler
Yeah,
icon over here. Okay.
and then let's see. What we need is uh, the content chaos tests, the fifth
Content
one from the top.
content chaos. Okay.
So what this does is it takes every text node on the page and it randomly changes it to be either half, double, or triple the amount of contents that's in there right now.
Okay.
So that makes it really easy to check how uh, resilient your UI is to indeed like longer sentences like German, or much shorter sentences, like for example, if you switch over to Chinese or Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you open the debug tools pop
Yeah.
over again, you can also reapply it.
Reapply. Oh,
So
oh.
so you
Okay.
can test it like a couple of times to see like how everything responds to much different sizing for the
That's
content.
awesome. I also just love that. Hey, hey, Ben, Ben, Ben. Let's learn Polypane in 3 minutes. Let's learn Polypane in 3 minutes. Definitely sounds like a very excited golden retriever if it could talk.
I might have to rename the feature now.
Golden retriever mode.
Yes, much better.
Puppy dog mode. Yep, I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, so we've got a ton of debug tools. Actually, do we want to look at any of these other debug tools while we've got this?
So it might be more fun to do that with some other sites.
Okay.
But we can like quickly go over the type of debug tools that are in there,
Let's do
or we
that.
can move on to one of the other things.
Yeah, I think if you want to just kind of maybe summarize a couple of maybe your favorite debug tools or the ones that you find yourself using most often.
Yeah, sure. So the top one is layout debugging. Now I don't use that as a debug tool all that often because it's also built into the entire browser. So if you press Command D,
Command D. Oh, oh, ooh.
so this adds outlines to every element on the page,
All right.
which is super handy for like doing layout debugging, which is
Mm-hmm.
why it's called layout debugging. But one of the neat things that this mode also does is when it detects that a given pane has a horizontal scroll bar, it figures out which element is causing that horizontal scroll bar. And that's super useful because if you don't do that, you have to like open the Devtools and like hide or delete elements one by one
Mm-hmm.
to figure out like which element is causing the overflow. And
Yeah.
now you can just press Command D and the offending elements or elements will be highlighted in red. So it's a much faster feedback loop.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. All right. Let me, I guess, turn off layout debugging mode. There we go.
Yeah. And then the immediate next one is the color contrast checker. And that's one I've also spent a lot of time on. So this will go through the entire page, find all the text elements, calculate their colors and background colors. So for example, if you have like multiple transparent backgrounds stacked on top of each other, you need to flatten that into the real color. So that's what we do. Then we compare the colors. And for every unique pair that is has sufficient contrast, we show a label once. And then for every pair that doesn't have enough contrast, we show a warning label, but we also calculate the closest text color that does have enough contrast, if we can calculate that. So that again makes the feedback loop much shorter, because the browser will just tell you, hey, you can also use this color, which is super close to your color, except it has enough contrast.
Yeah.
And then like you can hover over it and it previews it, and you can click it and it copies the color for like any offending colors.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This one you see right now it's inside a transparent div, but we can fake it. So if you press Alt again and then click on your name again.
Okay.
And then scroll to, or don't even scroll, at the bottom in the style tab, you can see color far accent color. And if you click on the color swatch, so the little, and then make it like a bunch lighter.
You got, I guess that's transparent, isn't that? Let's see. Yeah, you've probably got like an HSL mode. There we go. Yeah. So let's make this. Ooh. Oh, interesting. Let's see. What is the best way to go about this?
I usually just like click somewhere in the swatch.
Oh, click. Oh, I see. Yes, I got you. Okay. Yeah. So this is an absolutely abysmal color contrast now.
Yeah. So what we can now do is if we reapply the color contrast.
Okay. It's gonna be here. And it's gonna yell at us that our color contrast is 1.4 to 1, which is very close to basically you've got the same color.
Yeah, so if you hover over it, you can already see, like if you hover over the preview, it will show you like what it will look like. And then if you click it,
it says
copies it, so you can copy that into the style panel now.
All right.
And then press enter to apply it.
Okay. And then do I need to?
I don't think it's applied it yet. Make sure you don't have the semicolon there.
There we go. Okay.
Right.
Darker now.
And recheck again.
There we go. It says it's got 3.01 to 1.
Yeah, we fixed it. So as you can see, what it also detects is that this is large text. So it's larger than 19 pixels.
Okay.
Which means that the contrast has to be at a minimum 3 instead of 4.5. And yeah, so this is basically, again, like the tightest feedback loop you can have when it comes to fixing color contrast issues.
Absolutely. That's so good. Also, I wanted to call out Dan. Thank you so much for the subscription. I really appreciate that. Y'all, just so you know, I am planning on using subscription funds to pay for getting closed captions professionally made, so that way video recordings can have a faster turnaround. So I appreciate y'all's contributions to that. That means a lot. Yeah, this is super cool, and I can see you've got tons of other debug tools, stuff to play around with. Do we want to look into maybe one or two others?
Yeah. So one that's fun is maybe the readability.
Okay.
One, the fourth one from the top.
And if I hover over this info icon, it says it checks the readability of sentences using the automated readability index. Okay,
Yep.
so now I've got a
So
whole
this
bunch of green highlights here.
yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
this chops up your page into sentences and then calculates the readability of each sentence using the automated readability index, which
Okay.
is one of the more modern algorithms for calculating readability. There's literally dozens of them in varying degrees of
Mm-hmm.
how easy they are to implement. This one is relatively straightforward. In English, the algorithm basically says if you have long sentences with long words, they are harder to read than if you have short sentences with short words, which surprisingly holds up for most Western languages. So this one actually works for like nearly all Latin or Western languages. And then if Polypane detects that you're using Arabic, so you have the right language set for your HTML, we switch over to the automatic Arabic readability index,
Got
which
it.
is a similar formula, but it's tweaked more towards the the Arabic language.
Very cool. All right. So
So
that's
what,
neat.
yeah, like what you would use this for is the lighter green sentences, uh, the easier to read, and the darker red sentences, the harder it is to read.
Oh, okay.
And
So this one right here, the sentence that starts, "There's much more to learn." This has a readability index of 1 or 2 at different points in the sentence.
yeah,
And
so
so
it's
that's high
those are
readability, right?
yeah. So it goes from 1 to 50, I believe.
Okay.
And then there's also some mapping to American high school grades.
Mm,
But I don't understand those, or like I don't have that mapping in my head.
got it.
Like if I can't even name an example now, so I just go with the raw numbers.
Okay. Very cool. All right. So that's readability. Awesome.
Yeah,
There's already so much stuff, and I'm looking at this. I'm like, I definitely just want to play around with these, right?
yeah,
Like, oh, disable CSS, boom, no CSS. Just so much like I don't know. I feel like what you've done here is you've presented me with a toy box, and now I just kind of want to go like, ooh, I want to play with all the things.
yeah. Like just one more. The placeholder fire is
Let's
a
do
lot
it.
of fun as well.
Oh, okay.
So what this does is it replaces all the images with walkouts and all the text with these lines, which is great when you're presenting a design without final text to the
Oh,
client,
okay.
because either that'll be lorem ipsum and your client will be confused and won't be able to focus on the design, or it's placeholder text like crappy text or not final, and your client is going to focus on those texts not being right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very nice way of circumventing that specific issue.
Got it.
Like most designers and most developers will have had the experience that feedback on the design really only comes after the site has been delivered and it's online and it has the final text. Only then do most customers really can really usefully say anything about the design.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not their fault, because it's not their job. Their job is to sell shoes or whatever. uh, and then this is a nice way to either like coax or hack or help them understand that they need to look at the design, not at the content.
Awesome. Michael, thank you so much for the sub. Um, yeah, this is super cool. I like this. This is just so cool to look at. And okay, I have to know now. And I think someone called this out in the chat as
The
well.
hostile CSS one, yeah.
How isolated your Killian? Killian, what have you done? Kilian,
Yeah,
Killian? Can you
my
explain?
components my components aren't isolated at all because this page isn't built with components.
Okay.
And yeah, so this is literally hostile CSS. It's not something I came up with. Someone else came up with the idea of hostile CSS doing this specifically.
Okay.
So I implemented this. Um, and yeah, basically it adds really terrible CSS to your page at like a very high level
Oh.
of styling or a very low level of specificity.
And sees if
And
it
then,
cascades.
yes,
Oh. Oh, that's excellent. That's really interesting.
so that and what you would usually use this for is if you're doing web components, for example, you need to make sure that styles don't leak into your web components, and usually uh, you don't realize if they do because it generally looks fine and you don't have all style CSS on the rest of your site. You know, the style's going to match mostly. So it's very difficult to figure out if you've done the right thing for a given uh, uh, component.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I know we have more to get through, but also it occurs to me that like demoing the stuff out on a homepage which you have specifically made, like you are someone who is very attentive to responsive design and to accessibility. This might not actually be the best demo, right?
No,
Because you likely have done many more things right than perhaps like you are ahead of the bell curve here. So yeah,
I try not to have my own app yelling at my own app for
that's
things I did wrong.
that's
Yes.
fair. So I guess how would you like to go about exploring other features? Like, do you want to look at another site?
Yeah, that would be fun. Maybe there's someone in the chat that wants to volunteer their site if they dare. We'll be gentle.
We will be gentle, right? Like just I think yeah, if you want to volunteer your site, your own personal site, please, no work sites, but if you want to volunteer your own site, we can take a look at it. This isn't an opportunity to bash on your on your site, on your design, but rather it's an opportunity to explore ways in which we can debug and like improve our process. So if you'd like to
Absolutely.
volunteer your site, please feel free. And if not, we can just use my own site. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Isabel. Um, my my wonderful coworker Isabel has volunteered my own site, which is the fallback. If no one wants to volunteer their site, I'm happy to volunteer my own. Um, give people a few minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know what? I'll go ahead and pull up my site.
sure.
And we can go ahead and do that. So, oh, why would I do HTTP? Um,
It's fine. If it forwards, it forwards in Polypane.
got
So
it.
actually, that is an interesting thing to mention. Like most other browsers, and Chrome in particular, will like gently help developers if they don't know how to configure their server. So if there is any combination of HTTP, HTTPS with www and without www that doesn't quite work, and a user types that in, Chrome will just sort of hide that for them and forward them to the right URL, even if your server itself doesn't do that, and even if your
Mm,
server has an SSL certificate that doesn't actually work for that specific URL. Firefox is a little more strict there, and Polypane is super strict there because I don't think a
uh,
developer browser should hide if developers mess up their server configuration.
mm-hmm.
Also because I see it happen way too often. But other than that, like if your server forwards HTTP to HTTPS, Polypane happily follows. Same
Gotcha.
for HTSC, HSTS, high security transports,
Okay.
something that all just happens the same in Polypane as it does in other browsers.
Gotcha. So we have my site up, and as I scroll through, we can see kind of the different design decisions I've made, um,
Mm-hmm.
and we can see my use of grid. My homepage, ooh, love that. The kind of interaction happening across all of these. That's interesting. Love that. Yeah, my homepage is fairly responsive. In fact, I think I've actually done a pretty decent job with it. There's a few things I would improve, like I want to figure out if I can align like the kind of orphaned cards to like the left or something and make it like all
Yeah.
left aligned, but it's it seems to me like a fairly robustly responsive experience.
Yeah. What one neat trick we can do is we can press Command B.
Command B as in Bravo?
Yes.
What's
And
this?
then
Ooh. Oh,
then maybe press the V key.
V? Okay.
Yeah.
What is V doing? Do I need to do Command V?
No, just V anywhere, just the letter V.
I'm sorry, P, like, is that V or P or as in.
Um, what we can do otherwise is I want you to switch to the vertical layout. We can also go
Oh,
to the layout icon to the right
oh, there
of
we
the
go. It
office
worked
bar.
now. It worked now.
Ah, there we
There
go.
we go.
And then zoom out a little bit with like Command minus or just using that zoom.
Oh, oh wow. Okay. So I'm seeing my media queries put on full blast.
Yes. So these are all the media queries that we've detected in your own CSS. There's not six of them, but there's six paints we can generate from them.
Okay.
And that's because we also take the upper edge into account. So you seem to have all max width media queries. And that means that at the end of the last max width, there's still styling left, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we generate a pane that's significantly wider than the widest max width, and we create that pane as well.
Okay.
So usually what's very interesting here is that uh, what most developers do is that they add breakpoints as needed. You know, you're working on a site, and
Yeah.
then whenever you need a breakpoint, you add one. And that works really well if you only go up or only go down. But every now and then you get them jumbled up, or you know, if you're not a careful developer, then you use both, and you end up with these in between sizes where they either fall outside of like a max width and a min width, or they overlap between the two, and that can have like very unintended consequences.
Ah, okay.
And this is a really neat trick to suss those out. And
Mm-hmm.
it's also interesting to look at the sizes you have. In this case, like particular near the lower end, where you seem to have a
Yeah.
breakpoint at 350 and at 388 wide. And then
Yeah.
it could be that you know, for those sizes there is a significant thing you do, but it could also be that you can combine those, or indeed go without
Yeah.
one of them, and in doing so make your CSS much simpler.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm sure past me had a good reason for doing this, but like present me is looking at this and going, I have created extra debugging complexity for myself.
Yeah. And usually you don't realize that because, you know, a browser doesn't tell you this.
Yeah.
Uh, but here we can, you know, we can detect all the breakpoints and show them to you in a neat overview.
All right. That's super cool. Okay. So yeah, and I'm pretty sure like the styles that I had, especially kind of at the lower end, like these breakpoints were primarily adjusting things like the height of the diagonal, in which case maybe it
Oh,
would be
yeah.
more like cuz like the diagonal looks far less pronounced when it's like on a big screen versus if it's on mobile, like the diagonal looked huge,
Mhm.
so I like flattened it a bit. Um,
Right.
but maybe there's
I
other ways to like I could have gone about that would have been less breakpoint driven and more clamp driven or
so
something like.
I did write an article about that literally a
Oh,
few years
okay,
ago,
okay,
because
okay.
my own site has the diagonal as well, and you can use the clip path with yeah. So if you Google Kilian sloped edges, then you'll find it.
Oh man, this. Hang on. Uh,
So
well, I have
mine
some
has that as well.
fantastic search engine optimization. Look at that. That's incredible. Okay. I will drop this in the chat for everyone.
Yeah. So those edges are the angle is consistent regardless of the width of the page. Not for all these
Oh.
examples, because I go through everything that didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But if you scroll all the way down, you end up with uh, a clip path solution.
Oh, that's snazzy. That is very snazzy.
And so the neat thing about this is that it will keep the same slope regardless of how wide your browser is. And it does that by making the slope dependent on the width of the page.
Oh, that's very cool. I will have to look into this and incorporate it. Okay. Let me. There we go. And that would help with
Yeah,
the kind of debugging nature of this, right? Because there would be fewer views, right? The views
yeah,
would be because the views would be for like actual layout shifts and not because I wanted my diagonals to look a little nicer.
yes, exactly.
All right.
Um, yeah, so what we could do now for just to make it a little bit easier to see is you can press the F button,
Okay. All right.
and now we're in focus mode. Uh, and you can now use the arrow keys to switch between different breakpoint sizes.
Okay. Very cool. All right.
So this is very similar to the responsive mode, just again with all the tooling in Polypane and a little better developer ergonomics by making it really easy to switch to different pane sizes.
Yeah.
And maybe now we can open the panel.
Open the this panel.
No, the browser panel. So the icon to the left of the sizing or the zoom slider.
Oh, I see. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So naming is hard. The thing on the right is I call the panel.
Got it.
Uh, and then if we go to the info tab in it,
Ah, it's even
and
got my
then
meta information. Oh, that's
yeah,
beautiful.
so then this is a nice overview of all the meta information on the page and also not on the page, like the robots.txt or the web manifest, or if you have it, the OEmbed info, like WordPress sites
Oh,
have
okay.
OEmbed info by default, and it's actually used by some social media to uh, get at specific data.
Oh my god. I'm sorry. I post so much on Twitter and stuff that like I always have to go to like Twitter has its own social card validator.
Yes, and it's hopelessly outdated.
Yes. Wow, this has already changed my life.
So these are all pixel perfect. Yesterday I updated the Twitter preview because last week Twitter updated their design.
Did they really? Oh.
Yeah, so there's
Oh,
like the
yes,
big
okay.
thing
The
is that
the font change and stuff like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so the big thing is the font change, but uh, what also changed was all the colors, all the border colors,
Yeah.
some of the sizes. All very subtle, so you wouldn't be able to tell. But uh, I do because I make screenshots and I overlay them to get them pixel perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so these are all and it's me from Polypane saying it, but these are all much better than what the official previews give you, because for each of them, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, they all offer like testers and previews,
Mm-hmm.
but they were built like 3-4 years ago, and
Yeah,
no one has touched them since. So uh, they are just super outdated. And here in Polypane, I made sure that they're all pixel perfect and all up to date.
that's awesome.
So if you resize the panel to be a little wider, it will actually stop at however wide they are on the social media itself. And that means that if your text fits there, it will fit exactly the same as shown on
So
a
good.
given social media.
So good. That's that's incredible. All right. I man, time flies. I would love to specifically dive into some of the accessibility features that you've been
Yes.
building in, because I know A, you've been putting in a lot of work, and B, I think that easily these are some of the like coolest features to use to debug in a browser. So I'd love to dive into that with kind of some of our remaining time.
Sure. So one of the things that I really try to do is just have accessibility top of mind whenever you work in Polypane. So if you can press Alt again and then hover over anything, in the tooltip, I immediately show the calculated contrast, whether that matches AA or AAA, or indeed doesn't have enough contrast. I show the accessible name if there is one, the
Yeah.
role if there is one, whether or not an element is focusable, so that you know that all this info, uh, it's just there. Like as you're using the app, you're constantly also seeing the accessibility info, uh, which I think really helps in making sure that you don't overlook this stuff. Because
Absolutely.
usually I think for most developers it's not like ill intent. For example, when they have uh, a heading with like some funky HTML to make sure that a cool animation happens or whatever, but then the accessible name gets jumbled up
Yes.
for whatever reason, like there's spaces missing or there's entire words missing, and you don't realize that as a developer because you look at the page and you can read the heading and it looks fine and it does the pretty thing you want it to do, uh, and you don't realize that like under the hood it doesn't read well.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get that information if you dig down into the DevTools, into the the accessibility object model, but you don't do that for every
Yeah.
heading because it's
Yeah.
it's a lot of work.
And you might
Uh,
not even like know to look for that too, right? Like you
yeah,
might not have seen it before. Stuff like this that puts this front and center uh, is, I think, always going to be a more approachable strategy. That I tried whatever I could to not say approachable approach, but it's going to be, it's going to invite more people into the fold of accessibility by placing it front and center and not hiding it
yeah,
away.
yeah. So like that's really my accessibility strategy, as it were. Like on the one hand, make it really easy to discover, and then on the other hand, make it really easy to fix, because
Yeah.
that's the other problem. Uh, as developers, we're constantly racing towards a deadline. We don't get enough time to do research, and when you're faced with a problem that is a problem, but
Mm-hmm.
your boss won't notice because they have a super fancy iPad and they only tap on the iPad. Um, they're going to choose to fix the tickets that they have rather than spend an hour figuring out how to solve an accessibility issue.
Yeah.
not saying that's like the right thing to do. That's what happens. So what we need to do as tool developers, I think, is like really spend a lot of time tightening that feedback loop. Like every time there's an issue, I think Polypane should help you understand that there is an issue and also help you figure out how to fix it without you having to go on like a 2-hour soul search across like Google and the WCAD docs, and then be super confused because they're not written in the most clear language. Whereas in Polypane, I can probably say like this heading or this heading is like the wrong level, or you're already using this text somewhere else in a heading, and that's confusing because then you have two headings with the same content at different places in your site, and that hinders navigation, things like that. And I basically try to do that in like every bit of Polypane that I have. So if you now hover over an item and then press Alt and click, or Option and click, you can also see like right above the box model, I show the font and the font size, and then also check marks whether or not there's sufficient contrast.
Okay.
So you're constantly like being reminded that you're either doing things well, as is the case on your site, or not so well. And then just for ease of use, all this alley information that's also in the tooltip is also available at the bottom in the alley tab.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Here there's like the accessible name, the role, focusable, contrast, and then if there are any area or area related attributes added to an element, they show up here as well. So you have an overview of everything related to accessibility.
That's exciting. And then you have disability simulations as well. I would love to spend some time on those too.
Sure. Before we do that, maybe we can go through a couple of other panel options as well.
Yes, let's do that.
So if you can pop open the panel again.
Yep.
So if we head over to the info pane, or the info tab, and then like all the way to the right is source.
Oh, I see. Yes. Okay.
So this will load in your source and then format it using Prettier so that it's nice and easy to read, but it will also automatically do HTML validation with a whole bunch of accessibility rules built in. So the errors are at the top, and the warnings are really just to show you like where the issue is located.
All right.
So, for example, there's
some fixing to do.
Yeah, so there are a few things that I don't personally necessarily agree with for this this particular view, which is why not all of these rules are shown elsewhere. Like, for example, button is missing required type attributes. For a button that has a type button, you don't need to add type button.
That makes sense.
Right? This is for when you have a button of type submit in a form and you don't have a type submit, it's better to add type submit.
But for
it's important not to overlook that, even though if you have a button in a form without a type submit and it's the only button in the form, it will be a type submit anyway because your browser will fix that for you, as it does for many of these things. But yeah, so this will do like more general HTML validation, and some of that seeps into accessibility as well.
Okay.
Then, like one tab on, we have the accessibility tab. And this will run an Xcore test on your website, same as the Google DevTools do, and the same as Lighthouse does. Except what Lighthouse and Google DevTools don't have is if you have no accessibility issues, you get to press the celebrate button.
Hey.
But again, like what I want to stress here is that I do add the text, like, we didn't find any issues. Good job. However, you do need to test your site further.
Gotcha.
Like this not finding issues doesn't guarantee that your site is perfectly accessible, but you're well on your way. Good job.
I'm proud of me.
You should be. And then, like, lastly, the outline tab.
Ooh, okay. All right. I'm so here for this because I've often had to explain how headings form a document outline, and usually the way I have to go through that is like, well, first of all, let me pull up voiceover, and then I'm gonna pull up the rotor. No, stop. Where are you going? I promise this is relevant. Actually,
Yes.
seeing it
Yeah.
in this nested list structure, that's nifty. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. So this is built to basically mimic like a headings list that assistive technology would show you. Except what this also does is if you do anything wrong, quote unquote, you don't, so there's no warnings here, but it will show warnings. For example, if you use multiple H1 elements, you will get warnings. If you use no H1 elements, you'll also get a warning. If you skip levels, you get a warning. If you have two headings that have the exact same accessible name, because we show the accessible name here, that will give a warning. Because if you have like two context headings, like one at the top and one at the bottom of your page,
Yeah.
then like you and I can see like one is up there and the other is down there. But if you have a list, then you don't have that context. So that's confusing.
I find that really interesting because like the fact that you provide this feedback because like if you were to go to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, there are requirements about heading order, but those requirements are pretty vague. It's basically make it make sense. And it doesn't
Yes.
really prescribe what making sense means. Now, accessibility advocates over decades of testing have found that basically what it means to make sense is a structure like what you see here, where like you have one H1 that titles your page and then everything is nested like an outline. But WCAG doesn't prescribe that. You're still
No.
advising it, even though WCAG doesn't explicitly prescribe it.
Yeah, and the reason I do that is because like Polypane is not a specification tool. So we can be a little opinionated.
That makes sense.
And because we can be a little opinionated, we can also help developers do better. Because if you're a developer and you start working on a project and you see that this outline is a mess, then what are you going to do? Show the WCAG guidelines that say make it make sense?
Yeah.
Your senior dev that has their ego involved in this project is going to say, well, this makes sense to me, so this is not an issue, carry on. Whereas if you can show like very specific issues in Polypane, like there's two headings with the same text, or you're skipping a level, then those are very small and actionable.
Yes.
And you don't have to get into this large whiteboard session of what makes sense, and before you know it, you've bike shedded for 2 days on what makes sense for heading structures for our company.
Yeah.
Which is definitely not what you want, but definitely what happens way too often. So yeah, I do add things that aren't necessarily violations here, but violations is just like the bottom.
Yeah.
anyway. And you can do much better, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do that for headings, but I also do it for other things. So if you click on that drop down,
Yeah. What have we got here?
there's
Landmark.
also the,
Ooh.
the the document outline, or we can go to landmarks
Ooh.
as well. So there's
Okay.
this one uses the HTML5 document outline algorithm, which is great, but like literally no one uses it. So that's why it's not shown by default. It's just a thing that's in there. And it also does things like it will warn you for when you don't have a heading that matches to your body or to any landmark, because that is part of the document outline spec.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and if you click any elements, you go to the elements panel to edit it.
Very cool. All right.
So yeah, the document outline, it's there. Maybe browsers are going to do something with it at some point, but I doubt it because they haven't yet, and HTML5 is already years and years and years old.
Mm-hmm.
Just know that it's there.
All right.
And then if you go to landmarks and maybe links, like landmarks aren't too interesting, but again, here we'll warn you about if you have a page without a navigation, like that's not necessarily wrong. If you don't have a nav element on your page, like
Yeah.
not all pages need a nav element,
Mm-hmm.
but it's highly likely that your page does need a nav element. So we'll add a suggestion there, like maybe you need a nav element, maybe you need a banner, maybe you need a footer if they are missing, just to remind you that those are things you should care about if you want to build a well-structured website.
Awesome. And I'm noticing the 301s here, and these all seem to be on my external links. So.
Yeah, so that happens a lot. It's usually the 301s on your own site that you will want to fix, because they're usually like missing slashes or adding slashes.
Hmm.
But what's interesting here is that in the link overview, Polypane automatically checks all the links to see if they're broken or not. So that way you don't have to wait for one benevolent visitor to send you an email like, this page 3 levels deep on your documentation is broken.
Yeah.
Only for you to realize that it has been broken for 2 years and no one clicked it, or no one bothered to mention it. So Polypane just checks it for you, and then whatever is returned is shown.
Mm-hmm. God, so many things that like I had never envisioned that like Devtools could just do for me, and now it's like, yeah, why shouldn't my Devtools tell me which of my links are broken?
Exactly. It can just check that. And then for this, it also checks if you if you missed HTTPS on your links, which happens quite a lot. Like the WhiteHouse.gov website, when it was first launched, their top 2 Twitter and Facebook links were HTTP links.
Hmm.
And they just overlooked it. Like they used the HTTP versions elsewhere in the footer and stuff, but like the 2 ones like right in the heading, in the header, they were using HTTP, which is again, it's one of those things that's very easy to overlook.
Yeah.
And if you click that link, eventually you will end up at HTTPS.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just so much better if you just do it right on your own site.
Yeah.
So it will give you warnings about that, warnings about if you have links that go nowhere, like if you go to a JavaScript colon link, or if you have links that don't have text, because all they contain is an image, and that image has an empty alt attribute or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So all these things you can do wrong with links will show warnings for that as well.
Gotcha.
And then we do the same for images too, which is like the last, maybe the second last one. So you have one image, that's a real image on this page.
Everything else is a div with a background image.
Yep. and that's fine. And like it sees that the alt is empty, so it shows that the alt is empty, which is not a problem. It's only a problem when the alt is missing. So if the alt is missing, it will give you a warning for that. And then also, if you have an alt text that Polypane thinks is redundant, it will give you a warning for that as
Oh,
well.
so like an alt text that starts with image of, for instance?
Yeah, like image of or photo of or screenshot of.
Got it.
Because, assistive technologies already tell you that it's an image. So you don't have to do that in the alt text. And like that's a really honest mistake to make anyway as a developer.
Yes.
Like, you want to do the right thing and you have to describe the image. So you go, it's an image of and it takes this little bit of realization that you shouldn't have to type image of.
Yeah.
And then you do it right. So again, just gentle nudging to do the right thing.
For sure. All right. I'd love to dive into whatever the next thing is.
Sure.
What have you been adding lately?
Well, if we can go back to the older,
whoops. Yep.
the outline
Overeager.
tool once more.
Yeah.
And then drop down to focus order,
I
which
see.
is one I added recently. This will show you the focus order of your page.
Oh.
So how people tab through your site. Now, this list isn't too interesting. I mean, it's ordered correctly. So if you have like tab index usage or whatever, it will order this correctly, and it will also find like elements that are focused in other ways. But the cool thing is, if you click Show Overlay,
oh, it's connecting the dots.
Yes, it's connecting the dots. So it will draw lines from each focusable element to the next one. And with that, you can basically see if your focus order makes sense, because that's really what we want to do here. Like, is the focus order going relatively from like the left to the right, top to the bottom? Is it going to places where I expect it to go if I press tab when I press tab?
Yeah. Very cool. I think Firefox has something similar to this with the tab order indicators.
Yeah, so they added numbering recently.
Okay.
I still think mine's nicer because it has the lines. But yeah, Firefox has something similar, and it's just a really good way to check if something makes sense without having to like tap through a website, because that's one of those things that you do a couple of times as a developer. And
yes.
You're like, oh, this takes too much time. And now you can just turn this on, click through your website, and instantly if there's anything wrong. So, for example, the Dutch governmental website for getting a corona test. Obviously, that was built super quickly and under a tight deadline, etc. But they have a set of buttons, and like somewhere in the design, someone said, the button should be in a different order. Like the button at the bottom should be at the top.
Okay.
So they did that with like Flexbox.
Yeah, the like flex direction column reverse or something like that.
Yeah. But what then happens is the focus order first goes to the button at the bottom, and then it goes back to the button at the top. Which in itself can be okay if you have really strong focus styles, but they didn't. So it became super confusing to see like what was going on, like where you were if you were tapping through the site, because it was jumping all over the place basically. Whereas if you turn on this overlay, it will just show you like, yeah, the line goes to the bottom one and then it goes back to the top button.
Yes.
So yeah, that's really what I want to do with the outline panel, like make all that stuff discoverable in the first place,
Hmm.
because it's not really discoverable in most browsers.
Absolutely.
And then also make it actionable. Like you want to, like the other thing the focus order does is if you use a tab order that's higher than one, it will give you a warning, like, do you really want to do this? And again, it's not something that's wrong, and there
Hmm.
are legitimate use cases for forcing a certain tab order. Uh, but by and large, if you do that, you're probably not doing it right.
Hmm.
So it's something you should be aware of if you encounter it on your own pages.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah, if you can click hide overlay again, because otherwise this will just show uh, forever.
Okay.
And then we can go on to some of the simulators.
Let's do that. Yes. So, I'm gonna open up the debug tools, and we've been on the debug tools tab here, but there's also this simulators tab.
Yes.
This has tons of different disabilities that might impact how someone interacts with the page, or not even disabilities, but like situations as well, like
Mm-hmm.
sunshine, for instance. Um,
Yeah.
which one should we start with?
We can just start at the top.
Okay.
So we initially, when I built this, it was just color blindness simulators. Um, and I don't think your color scheme is very will change
Yeah.
very much with this.
Yeah, I don't
But
have a whole lot
that's
of
fine.
I don't have a whole lot of green in my
Yeah.
design. But yeah, I'm looking. I don't know how well this came across on your screen or across on the stream, but definitely my colors seem much less saturated.
Yes. So um, all these color blindness simulators are ordered by their frequency. So the most people who have color blindness have due to anomaly, and for the ones that I have been able to find data on, if you hover over the info tab, it will be like how many people are affected by this, like of the population
Hmm.
worldwide. Obviously, these are estimates that I haven't verified myself, as it were, because
Sure.
I'm not a scientist. I just you know use the numbers that things like Wikipedia tell me. But I do think it's very useful to have that information, so you're aware that uh, something like this, which basically dims all the colors. It happens, but it's very rare.
Yes.
Um, Whereas something like the Deuteronomy that we just demoed, which it wasn't a very big difference for this particular website.
Hmm.
Uh, it happens much more frequently than you think, and also it happens to people that you don't suspect. Because a lot of people with color blindness, it's just not something they mention, and of course it's not something they have to mention.
Hmm.
Um, but that also means that you might be underrepresenting, or mentally thinking there are less people with color blindness than there actually are.
Yes.
And having these numbers here, I think helps
Yeah.
you know bring that empathy, and bring that realization that it's something to care about. It's something to check at least.
Hmm. Like this even indicating like, well, about 5% of men have deuteranomaly, so get like 20 men that you know, and chances are good that one of them has this, right? And
Yeah.
something like this might be how they're experiencing the like your site. Alex, thank you so much for the sub. Too kind, too kind. Um, it is good to have you here. Um, yeah, and you got other simulators too that we've got. Let's see. You recently added tunnel vision, right? That was not that
Yes.
long ago. Let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. So tunnel vision, like it is like a little gimmicky, I think. Uh, but still, like it's insightful because
Mm-hmm.
when you try to use it with your site, you realize very quickly, like if you're interacting with a form and your error messages aren't next to the form elements, you're
Yeah.
going to have to go back and forth all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that again, that really breeds empathy. Um, like in a way that just saying like people have tunnel vision and they only see a small part of the screen,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't convey that. Whereas, if you're trying to interact with your page like this, it's much more difficult. And you can get by fine and you can read the page, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to take a bunch more effort.
Absolutely. Hey, first of all, Mike, thank you for the sub. And Alex and Mike, thank you for gifting those subs. That is entirely too kind. I mentioned this earlier, but I think y'all were off in another stream. Every sub goes to me paying for closed captions, professionally made, so I can have faster turnarounds on the recordings. So I super appreciate each and every one of these contributions. Um, yeah. Uh, and then
I
we.
see.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gillen.
Yeah, so the astigmatism ones are very recent too.
Okay.
Because I didn't know astigmatism was a thing. Because well, because I just didn't. Because it usually falls under like people need glasses because they either can't see up close or far away. But astigmatism is slightly different, and I wasn't able to find any simulation for it. So
Oh,
I
okay.
read up on it a whole bunch and figured out how to best simulate it on my live website. So
Ah,
astigmatism is
me.
basically best described as there's blurring of the page, but it's in one direction,
Okay.
and it doesn't have to be vertical or horizontal. It can be diagonal as well, but unfortunately, that's not something you can emulate nicely on the web. Um, so I figured I can do a horizontal and a vertical simulation of astigmatism.
Yeah.
Like it blurs it, but it also sort of duplicates
Yeah.
everything like slightly askew. And just looking at this, it gives me a massive headache. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah. Let me.
again, that just breeds empathy, where I can read all of this.
Yes.
It's just not really fun to read all of this,
Yeah.
and that can really help you figuring out, like, maybe we can convey this information more quickly, or
Mm-hmm.
these headings don't actually say what they should say uh for to get to the point quickly enough. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the point is being made like 3 paragraphs down at the end of a sentence, and it should be a header.
Gotcha.
And stuff like that, it's not something that a simulator will tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to use a simulator, hopefully those are the things you pick up as you
Mm-hmm.
as you interact with your own pages.
Yeah, I'd love to show off one more simulator, and we played around with this earlier just to make sure it would work. This is the Dyslexis Simulator. As you hover over this, it specifically calls out that this is going to emulate the dancing letters effect. What I found is that this can be a little disorienting if you don't experience this on a day-to-day basis. So just fair warning, I'm about to turn this on. The letters are going to start jumping around, so if you think that's going to pose a problem for you, please look away. I'll let you know when the effect is done. But yeah, it is. Yeah, we can see is causing my letters to flicker all over the place. Words are not spelled in the correct order. It is definitely a disorienting effect to see these letters constantly changing. So
Yeah.
I will go ahead and
Yeah.
turn
And so the yeah, if you can turn
the
it off again, we
the
can
effect is
continue
turned
again.
off. It's no longer live. So if you need to look back, feel free to look back.
Yeah, and so what happens there is, again, like you can figure out what each of the word means uh, as you look at it and
Mm-hmm.
as you puzzle it together. And that's fine. You
Mm-hmm.
can get to the content. It's just going to take much more effort, and it's going to take like specifically more effort the more complex the words are.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have a word like this, that's not going to take you very long to decipher, even if the letters are a little bit jumbled. But if
Yeah.
you have a word like screen reader and you're not used to seeing the word screen reader because
Mm-hmm.
it's not a word you read often, then that's going to take you much longer to figure out what it says. And that's essentially how uh, how people with dyslexia, how some people with dyslexia experience reading.
Mm-hmm. Um, Alex, thank you again for that last gift sub. Yeah,
Thank you.
so yes, to Kilian of all people. That is a wonderful, wonderful choice. Kilian, this has been fantastic. I super appreciate you coming on and demoing Polypane to us. Like, I can already just think of so many different things that I just want to like play around with. This seems like
My
such
pleasure.
absolutely like this seems like just such a fantastic tool to debug sites. So yeah, again, this has been Polypane. You can get it here. It is a subscription model, so there is a 2 week trial. Constantly new features though, continually just great new experience added. Additionally, we have had Kilian on today. I'll put his link in his Twitter in the chat there. Um, and while you're following people on Twitter, go follow Some Antics because you're gonna get all the great updates about upcoming streams. One thing to call out: I actually won't be here the next 2 weeks. Instead, there's going to be a guest host. It's going to be our own Adrian Mallet, who's been in the chat today. Next week, she is going to be bringing on Dan Goodwin, and together they're going to be doing end-to-end testing with Cypress. Super excited for that. It absolutely feels like those are the two people who could do it justice. And so I hope you'll join them next week. And yeah, y'all stick around a bit. I'm gonna find someone to raid, but this has been fantastic. Thank you all for being here, and thank you again, Kilian, for being here and for demoing such a great tool.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
See y'all next week. Bye.
Bye bye.